The laughter echoed off the marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. It was a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the pregnant silence following my husband's confession. Standing there framed in the doorway was his mistress Isabella, a smirk playing on her lips as she watched me. My world had just imploded, and she was laughing. I clutched my belly, a silent promise to the life inside me, that this would not be our end. As I packed a single suitcase, her laughter followed me down the hall, the soundtrack to my humiliation. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken everything. What she didn't know was that in my bag, next to a few baby clothes, was a notebook. And in that notebook, I would write our ending. The air in our Manhattan penthouse was always the same, climate-controlled, to a precise 72 degrees, faintly scented, with the Joe Malone diffuser Marcus insisted upon, and silent. It was a wealthy, sterile silence, the kind that swallows sound and secrets whole. From our 80th floor perch, New York City was a glittering, silent film. I used to think it was beautiful. That night it felt like a prison in the sky. My name is Amelia Hayes, or rather, it was Amelia Thorne. For 5 years I had played the role of the perfect wife to Marcus Thorne, the tech prodigy millionaire whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Wired. Our life was a curated masterpiece of charity galas, Hamptons weekends, and strategically photographed vacations that fueled the envy of his 2 million Instagram followers. I was the soft focus accessory to his sharp-edged success, the literature graduate with a quiet smile who had, by all accounts, won the lottery. But the jackpot was a lie. The signs had been there for months, small cracks in the polished veneer. Late nights he blamed on server crashes. The scent of a perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his suits, the second phone that was for international business only. I had ignored them, burying my anxieties under piles of nursery catalogues and prenatal yoga classes. I was 6 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter we had planned and prayed for. I told myself it was just the stress of his latest acquisition, the pressure of being Marcus Thorne. I was a fool. That evening he came home later than usual. I had prepared his favorite meal, coq au vin, the rich aroma, a stark contrast to the sterile air. He barely touched it. "We need to talk, Amelia," he said, pushing his plate away. His voice, usually so confident and commanding in boardrooms, was flat. My heart began a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. "Okay," I whispered, my hand instinctively going to my swollen belly. He didn't meet my eyes. He stared out at the city lights as if they were business metrics on a screen. "I'm not happy," he began, a classic cowardly opening. "We're not connecting anymore. Things have changed." "Things have changed, Marcus. I'm carrying your daughter. We're about to become a family. Of course things have changed. They're supposed to." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold, distant. "That's just it, Amelia. The baby. The whole domestic life. It's not what I want anymore. I thought it was, but—" He trailed off, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "What you want? What about what I want? What about what we wanted?" My voice trembled. "I've met someone," he said, the words dropping like stones into a deep well. "Her name is Isabella Rossi. She understands my world, my pressures. She's vibrant. She's not your pregnant wife." I finished for him, the words tasting like ash. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. I felt the baby kick a tiny, insistent flutter as if she knew, as if she was telling me to be strong. and then a sound from the hallway, a soft click of a door, followed by the tap, tap, tap of stilettos on the imported Italian marble. Into the dining room stepped a woman who looked like she'd been sculpted from Instagram filters and ambition. She was tall, impossibly slender, with raven hair and lips that were just a little too full to be natural. She wore a red dress that seemed poured onto her body. It was Isabella. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a look of bored triumph on her face. "I told you to wait in the study, Izzy." Marcus said, his voice a mixture of annoyance and resignation. He wasn't in control anymore. She was. "I got tired of waiting," she said, her voice a low purr. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my belly, with unconcealed disdain. So is the little wifey getting the picture. I felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with my pregnancy. I pushed myself up from the table, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I looked at Marcus, my husband, the man I had loved, the father of my child, and saw a stranger, a weak, hollow man, who would let this woman stand here and mock me in our home. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "Both of you." Isabella laughed. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a sharp, crystalline sound, utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. It was the sound of victory, of contempt of a predator enjoying its kill. That laugh broke something inside me that his confession hadn't. It cauterized the wound of his betrayal with the hot iron of pure humiliation. She was laughing at me, at my pain, my swollen body, my shattered dreams. "Oh, honey," Isabella cooed, stepping further into the room. "I'm not the one who's leaving." My eyes locked with Marcus's. He looked away, ashamed but resolute. That was my answer. This was her house now. Something inside me went cold and still. The tears I felt burning behind my eyes retreated. The trembling stopped. There was only a sudden, chilling clarity. I would not cry in front of them. I would not beg. I would not give them the satisfaction. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the dining room. Her laughter followed me, bouncing off the ridiculously expensive, soulless art on the walls. I went into our bedroom, my bedroom, and pulled a small suitcase from the top of the vast walk-in closet. My hands moved with a strange, detached efficiency. I ignored the designer clothes, the jewelry boxes, the symbols of my gilded cage. I packed 3 pairs of maternity leggings, a few soft t-shirts, my prenatal vitamins, and the worn, dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre from my college days. I packed the little grey elephant I had bought for the nursery, and at the very bottom I placed a new leather-bound notebook and my favourite fountain pen. As I wheeled the small suitcase toward the front door, I passed the study. The door was ajar. I could hear their voices, low and intimate. I paused my hand on the handle of my bag. "So much drama," Isabella was saying, a sigh of faux exasperation in her voice. "Is she gone yet? I want a glass of champagne to celebrate our new beginning." "Soon, Izzy. Just give her a minute," Marcus replied, his voice placating. I pulled the door open. They were standing by the window. Marcus's arms wrapped around Isabella's waist. She was leaning back against him, a triumphant queen, surveying her new kingdom. She turned her head and saw me. The smirk returned. "Finally," she said, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I said nothing. I held her gaze for a long moment, memorizing the casual cruelty in her eyes, the smug curve of her lips. I let my eyes drift to Marcus, who looked away like the coward he was. I wanted to remember this moment. I needed to. Pain, I knew even then, could be a powerful fuel. I walked out of the penthouse, closing the heavy oak door behind me with a quiet click. I didn't slam it. I didn't scream. In the silent, carpeted hallway, with the sound of her laughter still ringing in my ears, I made a vow to my unborn daughter. "They think they've won," I whispered to my belly. "They think this is the end of our story. But we're going to write a new one. And I promise you, darling, we will write the last chapter." The elevator descended 80 floors in a smooth, silent glide, a journey from one life to another. When the doors opened onto the grand, impersonal lobby, the doorman, a kind man named George, who had always saved me the fluffiest croissants from the morning delivery, rushed to help with my single bag. "Leaving for the evening, Mrs. Thorne?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. He saw my face, my lack of a coat, despite the autumn chill, the small, lone suitcase. He knew. "For a little while longer than that." "George," I said, managing a weak smile. "And it's Hayes now. Amelia Hayes." He nodded, a flicker of understanding and sympathy in his old eyes. He hailed a cab, held the door for me, and squeezed my arm gently as I got in. "You take care of yourself, Miss Hayes. You and the little one." That small act of kindness was the crack in my dam of composure. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the glittering tower behind, the tears finally came. They weren't loud, histrionic sobs, but a silent, steady stream that tracked paths down my cheeks. I cried for the husband I thought I had, for the family I thought we were building, for the naive girl who believed love was enough to anchor a man like Marcus Thorne. I gave the driver an address in Brooklyn, my sister Chloe's address. Chloe was my opposite in every way. Where I was quiet and accommodating, she was loud and fiercely protective. An artist who made a living selling beautifully chaotic abstract paintings online, she lived in a third-floor walk-up that was the antithesis of my penthouse. It was cluttered, colorful, and smelled of oil paint, roasted garlic, and life. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, suitcase in hand, face blotchy and tear-streaked, she didn't need an explanation. She simply enveloped me in a hug that felt like coming home. "That son of a bitch," she muttered into my hair. "I'm going to kill him. I'll use my palette knives. It'll be artistic." I let out a watery laugh. "Get in line." The first few days were a blur of grief. Chloe set me up in her spare room, which doubled as her studio. I slept on a futon surrounded by canvases of vibrant, angry reds and deep, sorrowful blues that seemed to mirror my own internal landscape. I barely ate. I stared out the window at the bustling Brooklyn street, feeling like a ghost. The world was moving on, laughing, yelling, living, while mine had stopped. The hurricane within me was relentless. Waves of anger would crash over me so intense I felt I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to march back to that penthouse and claw that smirk off Isabella's face. Then the anger would recede, leaving behind the vast, empty ocean of grief. I would curl up on the futon, my arms wrapped around my belly, and weep until I was exhausted. Marcus tried to call. The first time his name flashed on my screen, and I felt a jolt of pathetic, misplaced hope. Maybe he'd realized his mistake. Maybe he wanted me back. Chloe snatched the phone from my hand. "What?" she barked into it. There was a pause. "No, she doesn't want to talk to you. What's there to talk about? You made your choice. It's wearing a red dress and has the moral compass of a sewer rat." "Oh, I'm sorry." Did I hurt your feelings? Another pause. Listen to me. You pathetic excuse for a man. Don't you ever call this number again. A lawyer will be in touch. Have a nice life with your blow-up doll. She hung up and blocked his number. Then she blocked Isabella's social media accounts from my phone. Poison, she said, handing it back. We're on a detox. It was Chloe who saved me. She didn't coddle me or offer platitudes. She sat with me in the silence. She brought me tea and toast when I couldn't stomach anything else. She dragged me out for walks, forcing me to breathe the crisp air and feel the sun on my face. One evening, about a week after I'd arrived, she found me sitting in the dark, staring at the blank wall. You can't just sit there, Ames, she said, gently flicking on a lamp. He's not worth you fading away. The baby needs you. I know, I whispered. I feel so powerless, Chloe. He has everything. The money, the power, the lawyers. He took my home, my life. That woman, she laughed at me. Like I was nothing. Chloe sat down on the futon beside me. So what are you going to do about it? What can I do? I'm pregnant, I have no job, and my savings are in a joint account that I'm sure he's already frozen. That's the practical stuff. We'll figure that out. I'm talking about you. What happened to the Amelia who was going to write the next great American novel, the one who saw stories everywhere? I scoffed. She married a millionaire and got stupid. No, Chloe insisted, her voice firm. She got sidetracked, but she's still in there. You know what they say. The best revenge is a life well lived. I don't want a well-lived life, I said, the anger flaring up again. I want revenge. I want him to hurt the way I hurt. I want her to know what it feels like to be humiliated. Chloe's eyes lit up with a familiar fiery spark. Okay, good. Use it. She stood up and rummaged through my suitcase, pulling out the untouched leather notebook and the fountain pen. She placed them in my lap. What's this for? Write it down, she said. Write it all down, every last ugly detail. Write about the cold penthouse and the fake smiles. Write about his lies and her cruelty. Write about how it felt when she laughed. Don't write it for anyone else. Write it for you. Get the poison out. I stared at the notebook. It seemed like a flimsy shield against the towering fortress of Marcus Thorne's world. But it was something. It was mine. That night, for the first time in a week, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I opened the notebook. The first page was terrifyingly blank. My hand shook as I uncapped the pen. What would I even write? My life was a tragedy, a cliché. The rich husband, the pregnant wife, the younger mistress. But then I remembered Chloe's words. Get the poison out. I didn't start at the beginning. I started with the sound. Laughter, I wrote. It wasn't the warm, bubbling sound of joy. It was sharp and cold, like glass shattering on a marble floor. It was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at my heart. The words started to flow, hesitantly at first, then with a desperate purging urgency. I wasn't crafting sentences. I was bleeding onto the page. I wrote through the night, the only sound, the scratching of my pen and the distant wail of a city siren. I wrote about the weight of his secrets and the lightness of her morals. I gave them different names, of course. Marcus became Julian Croft, a titan of industry with a soul of ice. Isabella became Sable, a predator in designer heels. And I was Eleanor, the quiet wife who saw everything. I wasn't just writing my story. I was taking control of it. I was taking their ugly, cruel reality and reshaping it into my own narrative. In my world, Julian was not just a cheating husband. He was a tragic figure. A man so terrified of emotional depth that he surrounded himself with shiny, empty things. Sable was not just a victor. She was a desperate, hollow creature, her cruelty a mask for her own terrifying insecurities. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the paint-splattered floor, I finally put my pen down. My hand was cramping and my eyes were gritty from lack of sleep. But for the first time since leaving that penthouse, I felt a flicker of something other than pain or anger. It felt like power. The days that followed found a new rhythm. My life, once dictated by Marcus's social calendar, now revolved around two things: my growing daughter and the burgeoning world within my notebook. I would wake up, eat the breakfast Chloe left for me, and then sit at her rickety wooden desk, the one stained with a rainbow of old paint, and write. The story poured out of me. It was fiction, but it was forged in the fire of my truth. I fictionalized the names and the specific business Marcus was in, changing his tech empire to a ruthless private equity firm. But the emotions, the settings, the dynamics, they were real. I wrote about the suffocating opulence of the penthouse, which I called the glass spire. I wrote about the performative philanthropy, the backstabbing that passed for friendship among their circle, the casual cruelty veiled in polite smiles at society functions. And at the heart of it all was the relationship between Julian Sable and Eleanor. I delved deep into the psychology of it. I explored how a man like Julian, so powerful in the boardroom, could be so weak in his own home, easily manipulated by a woman who mirrored his own narcissism. I painted a portrait of Sable not just as a villain, but as a tragic product of a culture that values beauty and ambition. Above all else, a woman who saw love as a transaction and a heart as a liability. And Eleanor. Eleanor was me, but she was also more. As I wrote her, she became stronger than I was. She was more observant, more resilient. Writing her journey of discovery and quiet defiance, I began to feel some of that strength seep into my own bones. When Eleanor found the strength to leave Julian, it felt like I was reliving my own departure, but this time with clarity and purpose, not just shock and pain. Chloe was my first and only reader. Each night I'd leave the pages I'd written on the kitchen table. In the morning I'd find them back on my desk, with her notes scrawled in the margins. "More on this," she'd write next to a description of a tense dinner party. "Yes, got her," she'd scrawl next to a particularly scathing paragraph about Sable. Her encouragement was the fuel I needed. Meanwhile, the real world continued its assault. Marcus had, as predicted, frozen our main joint account. My personal savings were meager. I hired a divorce lawyer, a formidable woman named Genevieve Dubois, recommended by one of Chloe's art world contacts. Genevieve was all sharp angles and sharper intellect. "He's going to play hardball," she warned me during our first meeting in her stark, minimalist office. "His offer is insulting. He's offering a one-time payout that wouldn't cover a year's rent on the apartment he kicked you out of. He's citing irreconcilable differences and painting you as emotionally unstable. His lawyer, Stephen Pike, is a shark." "I have nothing," I said, the familiar feeling of powerlessness creeping back in. "You have his child," Genevieve said, her eyes steely. "That's not nothing. That's a lifelong responsibility he can't walk away from. We'll fight for proper child support, alimony, and a fair division of assets. It will be a battle." The legal battle was a slow, grinding war of attrition. Affidavits, financial disclosures, motions. Stephen Pike Marcus's lawyer used every trick to delay and intimidate. They questioned my fitness as a mother, hinted at my history of emotional distress, and tried to paint me as a gold digger who had been unhappy long before Isabella came along. Every legal document, every condescending letter from Pike was fresh pain. But now I had a place to put it. I would read their lies, feel the surge of rage and injustice, and then I would go to my desk and pour it all into my book. Their legal tactics became a chapter on how Julian's lawyers tried to silence and discredit Eleanor. The pain became prose. The pen became my sword. I followed Marcus and Isabella's life through the tabloids and gossip sites Chloe couldn't quite bring herself to block. They were shameless, pictures of them on a yacht in St. Bart's. Isabella, draped over Marcus, dripping in diamonds. A fawning magazine profile on their whirlwind romance and modern love story with no mention of a pregnant wife. Isabella had taken over my life and was wearing it like a new coat. She was at the galas I was supposed to attend, redecorating the home I had made and posing with the dog I had rescued. Each photo, each headline was a fresh stab. But it was also material. Their public flaunting became a powerful motif in my story. I wrote about Sable's insatiable hunger for the spotlight, her calculated use of social media to craft a narrative of triumph, and Julian's complicity in erasing his wife from his own history. 3 months after I left, I wrote the final words of my manuscript. I typed the end and stared at the screen through a blur of tears. These weren't tears of sadness, but of exhaustion and release. I had taken the ugliest period of my life and turned it into something new, something whole, something that was mine. The book was titled The Glass Penthouse. "What now?" I asked Chloe, holding the thick stack of printed pages. "Now," she said with a grin, "we find a shark of our own." Chloe knew a guy who had an old college roommate who was now a literary agent. It was a long shot. The agent Arthur Finch was a legend in the publishing world, known for his discerning taste and his brutal honesty. Getting an unsolicited manuscript past his assistant was said to be harder than getting a bill through Congress. "He'll never read it?" I said, defeated before I'd even begun. "He will if the query letter is good enough," Chloe said, "and we are going to write the best damn query letter he's ever seen." We spent a week crafting a single page. We didn't mention my life story. We didn't hint at the real-life drama. We sold the book on its own merits, a gripping psychological drama about wealth betrayal and the quiet power of a woman underestimated. I sent the email with the first 50 pages attached, my heart pounding. I expected silence or a form rejection in a few months. The call came 3 days later. It was an unknown number. "Is this Amelia Hayes?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes." "Arthur Finch, I read your pages. I want to see the rest of it. Send it now." He hung up. I stared at the phone, then at Chloe. A slow smile spread across her face. "I told you," she said. "I told you the pen was a sword." Arthur Finch was as terrifying and brilliant as his reputation suggested. After I emailed him the full manuscript, he called me the next day. "It's raw," he said, forgoing any pleasantries. "The pacing in the middle sags. Your dialogue is sharp, but your protagonist Eleanor is a little too passive in the first act. But the bones, my God, the bones are good. The voice is incredible. It's authentic. It's angry. It's marketable as hell." For the next month, I worked under Arthur's exacting guidance. He was a ruthless editor, but a brilliant one. He pushed me to dig deeper, to make Eleanor's transformation more active, to sharpen the satire of the world she inhabited. He forced me to cut passages I loved and expand on moments I had skimmed over. Every edit made the book stronger, more potent. It was grueling, intensive work, a welcome distraction from the slow, painful grind of the divorce proceedings. During that time, I felt the first real, undeniable flutters of my daughter's kicks becoming powerful thumps and rolls. She was a constant, comforting presence, a reminder of what I was fighting for. My world had shrunk to Chloe's apartment, my laptop, and my growing belly. It was a small world, but it was safe, and for the first time in a long time, it was mine. When Arthur declared the manuscript ready, things moved with a speed that left me breathless. He submitted it to a curated list of editors at the Big Five publishing houses. Within a week, we had our preemptive offer, an aggressive bid from a major publisher, Riverhead Books, designed to take the book off the table before it could go to a full auction. The editor, a sharp woman named Clara Jenkins, called me personally. "Amelia, I haven't been able to stop thinking about the glass penthouse since I read it," she gushed. "It's more than a domestic thriller. It's a profound social commentary. We want to make this our lead fiction title for the fall." Arthur negotiated a deal that made my head spin. The advance wasn't Marcus Thorne money, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was enough to secure my future and my daughter's. It was independence earned with my own words. I signed the contract on Chloe's cluttered kitchen table using the same fountain pen I had used to write the first words in my notebook. When it was done, Chloe popped a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne, and we toasted laughing until we cried. "To Eleanor," Chloe said, raising her glass. "To getting the poison out," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. The first person I called after Chloe was my lawyer, Genevieve. I explained the situation, the book deal, the title. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Amelia," she finally said, her voice laced with something that sounded like awe. "You are a genius. This changes everything." "How so?" "Marcus and his shark Pike have been stonewalling us on his full financial disclosure. They're hiding assets, I'm sure of it. They're painting you as this fragile, dependent woman who can't survive without him. A book deal of this magnitude for a book with this particular subject matter. It's a grenade thrown into their strategy." Genevieve's plan was audacious. We wouldn't mention the book's contents directly. Instead, we would use my newfound financial independence as leverage. In our next filing, we formally withdrew my request for spousal support. "We are stating," Genevieve explained, a predatory glee in her tone, "that Miss Hayes has secured her own financial future through her considerable talents and has no need of Mr. Thorne's support. It will drive them insane. They'll want to know how. They'll dig. And when they find out what the book is about, they will panic." She was right. 2 days after our filing, Genevieve received a frantic call from Stephen Pike. The condescending tone was gone, replaced by a strained urgency. A new settlement offer was on the table. It was 5 times the original amount. "We reject it," Genevieve told me coolly. "We wait. Let them sweat." My due date was approaching. The stress of the legal battle and the excitement of the book deal were taking a toll. Chloe was a rock, making sure I was eating, sleeping, and not obsessing over legal documents. One rainy October afternoon, my water broke. Everything that followed was a whirlwind of pain, fear, and overwhelming love. After 18 hours of labor with Chloe holding my hand and whispering encouragement, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She had a full head of dark hair and my eyes. I named her Lily. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt a profound sense of peace All the anger, the betrayal, the bitterness, it all just melted away in the face of this tiny, perfect human. I looked at her little face, her wrinkled brow, her tiny grasping fingers, and I knew that my life's purpose was right here in my arms. The revenge, the money, the success, it was all secondary. Writing the book had saved me, but Lily had healed me. A few days later, sitting in the hospital bed with Lily sleeping on my chest, Chloe handed me an iPad. "You might want to see this," she said, her voice tight. It was a gossip blog. The headline read, "Tech Titan Marcus Thorne and Socialite Isabella Rossi announce engagement." There was a picture of them beaming Isabella, flashing a diamond ring the size of a small planet. The article mentioned he was happily moving on after a quiet separation from his ex-wife. I looked at the picture of the smiling couple. I looked at the massive diamond. Then I looked down at the sleeping baby in my arms. 6 months ago, that photo would have shattered me. Now I felt nothing but a distant clinical pity. They were celebrating an engagement built on a foundation of lies and cruelty. I was holding my entire world. I handed the iPad back to Chloe. "Good for them," I said, and to my own surprise I meant it. "Let them have their pretty picture. We have work to do." A new strength had settled in me. I was a mother now, and a mother protects her child. The fight wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about justice. It was about securing the future for the little girl who depended on me for everything. Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi had no idea who they were dealing with now. They weren't fighting a heartbroken wife anymore. They were fighting a mother with a book deal and a very, very good lawyer. The publishing machine moved with terrifying efficiency. My editor Clara and the team at Riverhead saw the potential for a blockbuster and put their full weight behind The Glass Penthouse. An eerie minimalist cover was designed a stylized silhouette of a woman looking out a vast window at a glittering abstract cityscape. My author photo was taken by a high-end photographer, not the soft focus smiling wife of a millionaire, but a serious, thoughtful woman, shot in black and white. Amelia Hayes, author. It felt right. 6 months after Lily was born, The Glass Penthouse was released. The initial reaction was what we'd hoped for. The literary reviews were stellar. The New York Times called it a scalpel-sharp debut and a devastating portrait of the hollowness of modern wealth. The Wall Street Journal praised its insider's view of a world most of us only glimpse in magazines. It was chosen for book clubs, featured in airport bookstores, and climbed the bestseller lists with a steady, relentless momentum. But then something else began to happen. It started on niche book blogs and Reddit threads. Has anyone else noticed the similarities between Julian Croft's firm and Thorne Industries? One user posted, "Wait Sable, the Instagram model who breaks up his marriage. Didn't Marcus Thorne just get engaged to that model Isabella Rossi?" Another commented. It was a slow burn, then an explosion. A journalist for a popular online media outlet, The Daily Beast, wrote a long-form investigative piece titled, "Is the Hottest Novel of the Year a True Story, Unpacking the Parallels Between The Glass Penthouse and the Life of Marcus Thorne?" The article went viral. It laid out the timeline, my quiet disappearance from the social scene, Marcus and Isabella's sudden public debut, the timing of their engagement announcement. It quoted unnamed sources close to the couple, who confirmed details that mirrored events in the book: a disastrous Hamptons party, a corporate betrayal, a cruel dismissal of a long-time employee. My fiction was being held up as a mirror to their reality, and the reflection was ugly. The storm had broken. The glass penthouse was no longer just a novel. It was a scandal. It rocketed to #1 on every bestseller list and stayed there. I was invited on morning talk shows and for major interviews. Guided by Arthur and a publicist hired by the publisher, I remained demure and professional. It's a work of fiction, I would say with a calm, practiced smile when asked about the parallels. The themes of betrayal and resilience are universal. I drew from the emotional truth of what it feels like to be underestimated as a woman. But the characters and specific events are entirely my own creation. No one believed me, of course. That was the beauty of it. My plausible deniability only fueled the speculation. I was the wronged wife, but I wasn't playing the victim. I was the artist calmly discussing my craft while the world imploded around my ex-husband. The fallout for Marcus and Isabella was catastrophic. Marcus, who had meticulously curated his image as a visionary tech genius, was suddenly recast as Julian Croft, a cold, cruel, and easily manipulated man. His business partners grew wary. The stock price of Thorne Industries dipped. A major deal he'd been working on was put on indefinite hold. The mystique of Marcus Thorne, the untouchable titan, was gone. He was just a garden-variety cheating husband whose dirty laundry was now a national bestseller. But the public's wrath was most fiercely directed at Isabella, my fictional creation. Sable was a masterpiece of subtle villainy, and the public gleefully superimposed her character onto Isabella. Sable was vain, materialistic, cruel, and manipulative. Therefore, Isabella must be too. Her Instagram, once a shrine to her glamorous life, became a battlefield. Every photo of her and Marcus was flooded with thousands of comments quoting lines from my book. They posted snake emojis, called her Sable, and accused her of being a home wrecker. The luxury brands that had paid her for sponsored posts began to quietly terminate their contracts. The invitations to A-list events dried up. The fame she had craved had arrived, but it was a twisted, monstrous version of what she'd envisioned. She wasn't an admired socialite. She was a national pariah. I watched it all from the quiet sanctuary of the new apartment I had rented, a cozy 2-bedroom in a quiet part of the city. I'd see the headlines while Lily napped on my chest. I'd read the furious comments while feeding her pureed carrots. It was surreal, a war being fought in a world I no longer inhabited. Genevieve Dubois was ecstatic. "They're bleeding," she said over the phone. "Pike is calling me 3 times a day. Marcus is desperate to make this go away. He wants to settle the divorce now. He's ready to meet all of our demands and then some. He wants a non-disclosure agreement, thicker than a phone book." "Tell him I'll think about it," I said calmly. The power dynamic had completely inverted. I was no longer the powerless wife begging for scraps. I held all the cards. The book had become a more powerful weapon than any legal filing. It hadn't just attacked his reputation. It had deconstructed his very identity in the public eye. One evening, Chloe was over for dinner helping me bathe Lily. We were laughing as Lily splashed water all over the bathroom. My phone buzzed with an alert from a gossip site. Chloe picked it up. Her eyes went wide. Went, "Oh my God, Ames! You have to see this." She showed me the screen. It was a candid photo taken from a distance. Marcus and Isabella were in a heated argument on a public street. Isabella was crying her face a mask of rage and despair. Marcus looked harried, angry, gesturing wildly. The headline read, "Trouble in Paradise, Engaged Couple." Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi in public showdown. The gilded cage they had built for themselves was beginning to rust from the inside out. The pressure was getting to them. The fairy tale was turning into a nightmare. And Isabella wasn't laughing anymore. The desperate always make mistakes. A week after the public argument, my doorman buzzed up. "Miss Hayes, there's a Mr. Marcus Thorne in the lobby. He says it's urgent." My blood ran cold. He had never been here. He didn't even know where "here" was until now. He must have had a private investigator find me. "Tell him I'm not seeing anyone," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "He says he's not leaving until you talk to him." I took a deep breath, looking at Lily sleeping soundly in her crib. This was my home, my safe space. I would not let him intimidate me here. "Fine," I told the doorman. "Send him up, but stay by the elevator." When I opened the door, the man standing in my hallway was a ghost of the Titan I once knew. His expensive suit was rumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a tense, desperate energy. "Amelia," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. You should speak to my lawyer." I stood in the doorway, blocking his entry. "Please," he said, and the word was so foreign on his lips that it startled me. "Just 5 minutes. This book, this thing you've done, it's destroying my life." "My book is a work of fiction," I said, repeating the mantra. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Don't play games, Amelia. You know exactly what you've done. You've painted a target on my back. My business is suffering. My life is a circus." "Your life became a circus the moment you brought that woman into our home," I retorted, my own anger flaring. "You made your choices. These are the consequences." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice dropping. "Is it more money? Name your price. I'll give you anything. Just make this stop. Sign an NDA release, a statement, saying it's all a coincidence. Anything." It was the ultimate transactional offer from a man who only understood transactions. He thought he could buy his way out of the truth. He thought he could buy my silence. The old Amelia might have been tempted by the security. The new Amelia felt only contempt. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice quiet, but laced with steel. "This was never about money. This was about you throwing me away like I was nothing. It was about your mistress laughing at me while my world fell apart. You can't put a price on that, Marcus. You can't buy back my dignity. I had to build it myself." He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time, perhaps ever. He wasn't seeing the quiet, accommodating wife. He was seeing a stranger, a woman who had found her own power, and it terrified him. "So that's it," he said, his voice cracking. "You're just going to let it all burn down." "I didn't light the fire, Marcus. I just wrote about the ashes." From inside the apartment, Lily let out a small cry as she began to wake from her nap. The sound broke the spell. "You need to leave," I said, my voice softening slightly. This man was my daughter's father after all, however pathetic he had become. "Goodbye, Marcus." I closed the door on his shocked face, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. It was over. I had faced him, and I hadn't flinched. But the story had one more twist, and it came not from Marcus, but from Isabella. Driven to the brink by the public shaming and the crumbling of her dream life, Isabella made a final desperate play. 2 days after Marcus's visit, she did the one thing no one expected. She went on the offensive. She hired a high-profile, notoriously aggressive lawyer and filed a lawsuit against me and my publisher for defamation and libel. Her claim was that the glass penthouse had maliciously and intentionally ruined her reputation, and that the character of Sable was a direct, false, and damaging caricature of her. It was a bold, reckless move. Genevieve Dubois was practically giddy when she called me. "She's handed us the gun to shoot herself with," she said. "This is the best thing that could have happened." "How?" I asked, panicked. "A lawsuit, a trial. I don't want to go through that." "We won't have to," Genevieve said. "In a defamation case, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove that what you wrote was false and that it caused her harm. To do that, she has to submit to a deposition, under oath. She will have to answer questions about her relationship with Marcus, about the timeline, about what happened the night you left." Genevieve paused for dramatic effect. "And more importantly, to prove damages, she will have to open up her entire life, her finances, her communications, everything to discovery. She has no idea the hornet's nest she just kicked." The deposition was scheduled. Isabella, coached by her lawyer, was arrogant and defiant. She portrayed herself as the victim of a jealous, vengeful ex-wife. She denied the book's depiction of her as manipulative or cruel. Genevieve, calm and methodical, led her through the timeline of her relationship with Marcus. "Miss Rossi," Genevieve asked coolly, "when did your romantic relationship with Mr. Thorne begin?" "About a year ago." Isabella lied, trying to create a narrative where the marriage was already over. "So it did not begin while he was still married to and living with my client, Amelia Hayes." "Their marriage was a sham. It was over long before I came along," Isabella insisted. "So you feel your actions were justified?" "I fell in love," she said, trying to sound noble. "He was trapped in a miserable, loveless marriage. I rescued him." Then Genevieve pivoted. "Miss Rossi, you claim the book has caused you financial harm. Can you describe your financial situation prior to meeting Mr. Thorne?" Isabella's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. The questions were relevant to proving damages. Flustered Isabella was forced to admit her income was sporadic, based on influencer contracts, and that she had significant debt. Then came the masterstroke. Genevieve produced bank records, obtained through discovery, showing massive regular cash transfers from a holding company owned by Marcus into Isabella's account starting nearly 2 years prior, long before her claimed timeline. "Miss Rossi," Genevieve said, sliding the statements across the table. "Can you explain these payments from Mr. Thorne, which began while he was by all accounts happily married?" Isabella stared at the papers, her face draining of color. She stammered, she floundered. Her lies were unraveling under the harsh light of legal scrutiny. But it was her final act of desperation that brought the entire house of cards down. In a heated exchange trying to paint Marcus as a man who controlled everything, she blurted out something she thought would save her. "He was always so paranoid," she exclaimed, her voice shrill. "Worried about audits moving money between shell corps. He even bragged to me about how he funneled funds from the last Thorne Industries acquisition to avoid taxes. He controlled everything. I was just along for the ride." There was a dead silence in the room. Isabella's own lawyer put his head in his hands. She had just under oath, in a desperate attempt to portray herself as a pawn, admitted to witnessing and having knowledge of felony tax evasion and securities fraud. The defamation suit was dropped the next day, but it was too late. The deposition transcript was leaked. Within a week, the SEC and the IRS announced formal investigations into Marcus Thorne and Thorne Industries. Isabella's attempt to ruin me had not only failed, it had utterly destroyed the man she had attached herself to. In her desperation to escape the shadow of a fictional character, she had become the architect of her own and her lover's real-world demise. It was a twist so poetic, so perfectly ironic, that even I couldn't have written it better. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The federal investigation into Marcus Thorne was the kill shot to his already wounded empire. His board of directors forced him to resign as CEO. His assets were frozen pending the investigation. The man who had stood at the pinnacle of the financial world was now a pariah facing the very real possibility of prison time. His engagement to Isabella was quietly called off. Left with no money, no reputation, and potential legal exposure of her own, she vanished from the public eye as quickly as she had appeared. My divorce was finalized not with a bang, but with a whimper. Marcus, humbled and broken, agreed to every one of Genevieve's terms. The settlement was substantial, securing Lily's future tenfold. But the true victory wasn't the money. It was the knowledge that I had won on my own terms with my own strength. The NDA he had so desperately wanted was off the table. I was free to tell my story, and I already had. Life found a new, beautiful normal. My days were filled with the simple joys of motherhood. Lily's first steps, her first words, her infectious giggle that was the polar opposite of Isabella's cruel laugh. The glass penthouse stayed on the bestseller lists for over a year, becoming a cultural touchstone. I started working on a second novel, this one not about pain and revenge, but about resilience and finding love after loss. About a year after the divorce was final, I got a call from my agent Arthur Finch. "Are you sitting down?" he asked, a rare note of excitement in his gruff voice. "I am now. What's going on?" "David Sterling's office called." I gasped. David Sterling was one of the most respected and successful film producers in Hollywood, known for smart, character-driven dramas that always ended up at the Academy Awards. He read the book. He loved it. He wants to meet. He's flying to New York next week. The meeting took place in a lavish suite at the Carlyle Hotel. David Sterling was exactly as I'd imagined, charismatic, intelligent, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. He didn't talk about the scandal or the real-life parallels. He talked about the characters. He spoke about Eleanor's journey, her quiet strength, her transformation. He understood the heart of the story. "What you wrote, Amelia," he said, leaning forward, "is a timeless story about a woman finding her voice. It's a doll's house for the modern age. I want to put it on screen. We're thinking of approaching Cate Blanchett for the role of Eleanor." I was speechless. Cate Blanchett, a real film. The negotiations took a few weeks, but the offer was incredible. My book, born from the ugliest moment of my life, was going to be a major motion picture. The day I signed the film rights deal was a bright, clear spring day. I met Genevieve at her office. The contracts were spread across a large mahogany table. I picked up the pen, a beautiful heavy fountain pen Genevieve had gifted me. As I held the pen over the signature line, my mind flashed back to that night in the penthouse. I could almost hear it, the echo of Isabella's sharp, cruel laughter, the sound that had been meant to break me. She had laughed as I, a pregnant, heartbroken woman, packed my bags with my life in ruins. She thought she was watching the end of my story, and now here I was. In my purse was a picture of my beautiful daughter Lily. In the bank was the money from my best-selling novel and my divorce settlement securing our future. And in my hand was a pen poised to sign a deal that would turn my story into a film for millions to see. Isabella was gone, a footnote in a scandal of her own making. Marcus was a fallen titan, a cautionary tale. And me, I was Amelia Hayes, a mother, an author, the writer of my own story, from the first word to the last. I looked at Genevieve, who gave me a small, proud nod. I took a breath, and with a steady hand, I signed my name. There was no grand flourish, no triumphant cheer. There was only a quiet, profound sense of peace. The laughter had long since faded. The only sound in the room was the gentle scratch of a pen on paper, writing the perfect final chapter. Amelia's story is a powerful testament to the fact that our lowest moments do not have to define us. What started with a sound of cruel laughter in a cold penthouse became a story of incredible strength, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt her life from the ashes, turning her deepest pain into her greatest power. Her journey shows us that the pen can indeed be mightier than the sword, and that the best response to humiliation is not to sink to that level, but to rise so far above it that they can't even reach you. What did you think of Amelia's transformation? Do you believe in the power of turning pain into art? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you or reminded you of the strength you have inside, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true life stories of justice and incredible transformations. Thank you for listening.